Time now for the close with our business editor, Ross Greenwood. Ross, the September jobs numbers a bit better than expected, weren't they?
They were a bit better than expected. It's interesting, they came in at 4.6% from 12.5-year lows the previous month at 4.5%. So they were expected to be to deteriorate even further from this as jobs were lost as a result of the lockdowns around the country. We can basically show you some of these numbers, and so you can see not just that, but also the hours worked. Now, these increased during the month, and the reason for this was largely as a result of Queensland reopening. The second thing about this is the unemployment number looks perhaps better than you might anticipate as a result of that participation number. So in other words, when people are locked out of their jobs, effectively if they withdraw from the labour force, they really, if you like, change the number of people employed in the total workforce. And that's the reason why the unemployment rate remains relatively low. Now, the interesting thing is going to be what happens next. But one thing is that Josh Frydenberg, who has been in lockdown as a result of one of his staffers having coronavirus, has now come out. He was very keen to get a test and clearly front the media today. Here's a little of what he had to say, and just have a think about who is this message really for.
Since New South Wales has reached the 70% double dose vaccination rates, more than 500,000 people have come off the COVID disaster payment. It's still early days, but the signs are very positive. When you open up your economy, people get back to work. The quicker you open up the economy, the quicker the recovery takes hold.
So, Kieran, I don't want to be a betting man or so. I'd reckon that was aimed straight at the Queensland and the West Australian premiers. But the interesting part about this is as the states reopen, as borders reopen, state borders reopen, lockdowns end, what you're going to see is a lot of people hit the workforce. You can see this already in New South Wales, lots of employment taking place. But what that also means is some of these hidden unemployed, the people who have left the workforce, they go. Now, I spoke today to Bjorn Jarvis. He's the head of employment statistics at the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and he made the observation that when things open up and lots of people go back into the workforce, you might strangely see the unemployment rate rise and not fall. Here's what he said.
It'll really come down to how quickly do people who are not currently able to be active within the labour market, how quickly can they either go back to jobs that they were doing before or go into new jobs.
Ross, overnight the US annual inflation jumped to 5.4%, triggering suggestions that rates there and around the world will increase sooner rather than later. What's your assessment of that?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it. We saw it in New Zealand last week. Remember, again, the Reserve Bank says it's not going to touch rates until 2024. So, 2 years or 18 months to go there. And yet you saw New Zealand increase rates last week. You've actually had other nations around the world, Norway increasing interest rates, South Korea increasing interest rates. But here the Reserve Bank says no. Now, off the back of that, many economists are suggesting the United States will increase interest rates and therefore put pressure back on Australia to increase its rates, perhaps in the middle to late next year. Interestingly enough, Singapore today also succumbed and saw that inflation is a key in its economy. It took the opportunity to raise its interest rates. So, as I say, there is a real pressure and a trend around the world. I just wonder how long our own Reserve Bank can resist that as well.